So I'm gonna start recording videos about things that I don't get to talk to people that I know in my life very often about. Generally what I would call cosmological things, not in the material scientific sense of astronomy, but what I would call cosmological in the way of understanding the world as a whole, in kind of a symbolic and holistic sense on the three levels of divine, spiritual, and material. So, for now, I have microphone issues, so I'm having to use my headset microphone, which is very professional, of course, but, you know, you gotta start somewhere. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Welcome to the video, fellas. To kind of flesh out the definition of what I mean by cosmological understanding of the world, I mean seeing things, people, events, stories, things in the world on a deeper level, rather than kind of in a wider way where you understand things relative to where they are and how they relate to things on the same plane as them, or in a kind of causal, teleological, to use a big word, a causal sense in terms of where they came from, what they are now, and where they're going, and how that relates to what's around them. The kind of understanding that I like to think about is a deeper understanding, which means understanding things in how they relate to the world, and how they relate to you or me, and how they relate to themselves, maybe, on a deeper level. So, if you understand something on a deeper level, what that means is you can say, okay, I see marriage, or I see men and women, and this is something I'm going to talk a lot about in this video, as a specific case, and say, okay, what does it mean to be male and female, or masculine and feminine, and what does it mean, how does that relate to me, how does that relate to the divine, like God, and how does that relate to the world, you know, in a more general sense, how do things work. But overall, kind of what I really enjoy thinking about and talking about is understanding things in a deeper way, understanding the meaning of things, and understanding what they are, why they are the way they are, or what they're supposed to be, right? So the specific example that I want to talk about was the natural dichotomy of the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female. And I mentioned before there's the three levels of, or there's understanding things on three levels. You've got the material understanding of things, the material world. You've got the spiritual understanding of things, the spiritual world. And you've got the divine understanding of things, the divine world, you know. The method that you see a lot of, the hermetic and method of analysis, is broken down into 4 steps. This method of analysis is also used in Lectio Divina, which was used for centuries by monks. And you can still find in some churches they'll do Lectio Divina services. They do it at my church, but I usually miss the meeting, you know, because it's on an odd time or an odd day. But anyway, in a more broad sense, the hermetic method of analysis is seeing, meditation, application, and recording. So you see the world, you think about the world, you either act on the world, or you use your knowledge, what you've realized about the world, for something, and then you record all of that. So that relates to my definition of cosmology, or the definition of cosmology that I gave earlier, being an understanding of the world as a whole. Cosmos in the root sense means the world or the heavens, the universe, and ology is Latin for logo. It's a root that is based in the Latin word logos, which means image or picture or painting or writing. So it's the writing of the cosmos, or it's the image of the cosmos, and that relates back to the hermetic method of analysis, where you're saying, okay, this is what I see, this is what I understand, this is how I've acted on it, and here's a recording of all of that. So it's cosmology. And in that, those 4 steps are the hermetic method of analysis. So you can say, okay, I see in nature, in the material plane, the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female. And you say, well, what are these things? What do they do? How do they relate to the world? Stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So to go to basics, in the natural world you have the male and the female. And the male and the female act together to create new life. To go down to a more specific sense, the male is the active participant in the reproductive act, and the female is the passive in the reproductive act. What I mean by that is the female is the womb, she is the seed, she is the egg waiting to be fertilized. And the male is the seed, he is the planter, he is what goes forth to father or create new life. Because the female can't do this herself, because she is just the womb. And the male can't do this because he does not have the womb. He is the seed. And I'm trying not to get too lewd with this. The woman is the seed, is the womb, and the male is the seed. And then you can see this in a more general sense. You can see that in the field, right? Where you've got the earth, you've got the dirt, you've got the field lying, waiting to be planted. And the farmer, he goes out and in the old way, you toss seed and plant it, or depending on what the crop was, whatever. But he plants the seed and it grows and it brings forth fruit. But the field cannot do this itself, and the farmer cannot grow with just seeds. It needs dirt. So you can look at the natural and you can say, okay, well, what does this mean? And so you think about it and you say, well, okay, you've got the male and the female, and you've got the farmer and you've got the field, and you can broaden that and you can say, well, okay, what if the whole earth is the field, right? And man or God is the farmer, where the earth waits for us to plant it, or for God to plant in it new seeds to bring forth life. And that kind of gives you kind of an idea of what the masculine and the feminine are in the natural order. Is the masculine is the active, the hunter, the planter, and the feminine is the passive, the waiting, the womb that holds and brings forth new life, right? So that kind of gives you an idea of what that means. These 2 ideas go way further into so many more things than people, I think, want to realize, or maybe not want to realize, than people are conscious of, right? So if you take that and you apply it to humans, just humans, for example, you can say, well, the father is supposed to be, he brings in the food, he is the hunter, he goes out. And the mother she is the caregiver, she takes care, she incubates, or she raises the children in a safe place until they're ready to go out into the world. So you can say, well, the father plants the seed and then the mother protects that seed and grows that seed for 9 months and has a child. But it doesn't end there, because the father then has to bring back more seed, more life, more active material waiting to become life in the form of food and in the form of money and in the form of livelihood, right? So the father goes out and he gets a job and he brings back money, and then the money is used to pay for food and shelter and clothing for the children, who are still under the protective care of the mother, who are still in kind of a symbolic or metaphorical womb, where they're in the home. They're the home now. And the mother is in the home. She has become the home. She has to protect them, but she also has to teach them and prepare them for the world. And the father takes part in this too, but in a different way. So now you've said, well, okay, now it's not just the marital act, let's say, but it's the familial act of, you have the father and the mother. And then you can also say, well, what does it mean to be a man? And you can say, well, it means you are the pursuer. You go out and you get what you want. That kind of gives you an idea of what it means to be a man. And well, what does it mean to be a woman? It means to be a home. It means to be lying in wait for the man to bring back what you need in order to take care of the life that you have, or the life that you've been given, right? And it's just interesting, you know, because this also goes into other things where it's like, well, okay, in kind of classical alchemy or astrology, you have the sun and the moon, and the sun is the masculine and the moon is the feminine, and that kind of dualism. The sun, it brings forth life, and it provides light, and it gives us the daytime, and the daytime is when we go out and we get food, and we go out and we go into the world. And the nighttime is when things are done in secret and things are done in darkness, where things that are not meant to be in the day are done, you know? And you see this a lot in older books, and Shakespeare and stuff like that, where the things that happen at night are sometimes the most significant and the most impactful, but you're not supposed to know about them. They're not supposed to be known. And the only way that they are known by the people participating in them is by the light of the moon, which isn't a primary source of light. The moon is a secondary source of light. The moon actually gets its light from the sun. The sun reflects off the moon, and the moon reflects onto the earth. So what we're given is a secondary light of the moon, which is still light, and it's still good, but it's not the light, you know? So in kind of a Christian application of this, you have the sun, and then you have the moon. Well, the sun is God, and the moon could be the church, for instance, you know? And that's an interesting thing, because I was listening to a lecture by a very incredible woman talking about symbolism of Christmas. And she talked about how the Catholic Church goes through Lent and Easter and Christmas and all of these seasons as a way of keeping time and as a way of reminding us of the things that we're liable to forget. And you can take that and you could say, well, the church is the moon, but then you look back at the moon, and the moon in the old world was used as a way to record time, because it would be you'd have the new moon, you'd have the full moon, you'd have the half moon, the crescent moon, the waxing and the waning, and the gibbous moon, I think is how you pronounce it. And that's very interesting. So the church becomes the moon, and the sun is God. And you also see this in the East with the yin and the yang. And the East has the East has kind of a nuanced look at this with the yin-yang symbol. And I hate how banal it has become, the yin-yang symbol, because everybody's like, ooh, it's a yin-yang symbol, you know? And you see it everywhere, but people have an understanding of what it means, but the impact of that meaning has gone. So you've got the male and you have the female, and they have to exist together to create a circle, and the circle is kind of symbolic of completeness. And then within the circle you have the male and the female, but the male has a tiny aspect of the female, and the female has a tiny aspect of the male, which is reflective of reality. I mean, the masculine cannot be short of God himself. The masculine aspect of anything cannot be totally masculine, and the feminine aspect of anything cannot be totally feminine in the object or the thing itself. That's kind of a nuanced look at kind of the reality of life, rather than the more the idealized that you see more commonly in the West. But it's interesting, and you can take it to so many things. And once you have an understanding of what the masculine and the feminine are supposed to mean and what they are supposed to be, then you can start to apply that to your own life. And you can apply that to the world, and you can say, well, okay, what's going on in the world? You can ask, you can see that something is broken. You can see that marriage is broken in America, for example. You can see that the home is broken in America, and you can say, well, okay, what is the home realistic in this kind of symbolic understanding and the cosmological understanding of the natural order of things? And the home is supposed to be the mother. It's supposed to be the feminine, because within the home is the children, and the children have to be protected and fed and raised up until they're ready to go out into the world, to be born into the world. And the rite of passage that you so often saw in more primitive cultures, where you became a man or you became a woman. And it's interesting because you became a woman in a more passive sense, where this thing happened to you, you know, where, okay, you've experienced this thing and now you're a woman, and that's just that. And there's nothing you can do about it. But to become a man, you actually had to prove that you had become a man by going through a rite of passage. Indians will often go into the forest or the desert and fast and hunt or something like that until they got a vision or something to that effect. And I know it's present in other cultures, but I'm not as familiar with it as some people are. But you see it, where the male rite of passage is an active thing, but the female rite of passage, and it's not even really a rite of passage, it's just a thing that happens, and once it happens, you're a woman. So you see that further reflected in older cultures, and less, I don't want to say less developed, because I think if you have that understanding, you're more developed than if you don't have that understanding. And the fact that we don't really have that understanding in the world in the society that we live in, makes us less developed in a certain way. So I don't want to say developed in the holistic sense, maybe more material that you develop, more technologically developed, that we've lost, you know? It's just interesting to see that kind of thing reflected. And you see it also in stories and in literature. You see it in the Iliad. You see it in the Odyssey, where Odysseus, he's trying to get home. He's been at war. He's gotten his treasure. He's gotten his victory and all of this. But now he has to get home. And his wife, Persephone, I don't know how to pronounce those Greek names. She's at home waiting, and there are men back at home pursuing her, but they're doing it in a more perverse sense, where they're just doing it for their own good, where they're saying, well, here's this wife of a former prince who, for all we know, is dead, and, well, she's going to be mine now. So you see that kind of perverted masculine aspect in them, where they're not pursuing the woman for the sake of creating a home and creating a family, which is kind of the all-encompassing. The family is kind of the axiom of the world, you know, where the family is kind of the world become microscopic, you know, because you have the father and you have the mother and you have the children. And that's the three kind of aspects. And those are the three most important aspects of anything. And the Roman Catholic Church emphasizes this heavily, where just short of saving souls, the next thing that the church does is to keep the family safe, because it's the most important part of society. Because if you don't have well taken care of, well developed, well civilized, well nurtured families, then you cannot have a civil society. And we see that today, where things are breaking down on every level, because we've kind of forgotten the basic understanding of what things are supposed to be. And I guess that's kind of what I like to talk about, is what things are supposed to be. But, you know, nobody likes to hear about that. They're just like, well, this is how it is, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And I'm like, I know. But this is what it's supposed to be. And if nobody knows what it's supposed to be, then nobody can actually take any steps to fix it. And it just continues to break, and it continues to break down even further. You know, where you have fatherless homes and you have motherless homes, and you have not even homes where the kids don't even feel safe with their own parents, for good reasons or for not. But anyway, it's just interesting to kind of, once you start to see it and once you start to think about it, you see it more and more, and you see these understandings of the masculine and the feminine, just for an example, kind of growing out into everything. And there was a anime that I watched, a more recent anime that I watched that dealt with these ideas of the masculine and the feminine and the home and the marriage and the relationship of the masculine and the feminine in a very interesting and very well developed way that I don't think a lot of people appreciated. And I may go and make a video about that soon, but I think I would like to rewatch it first just so I can kind of refresh my mind about what those things were. And so I'm not just blowing smoke when I'm talking about this show that some things I remember, some things I may forget. But the show went further into a lot of other things that weren't just about the masculine and the feminine. But those two things specifically were kind of the crux of the show. And it was very interesting. So, but you know, you see it all over the place. And once you see it and once you start thinking about it, it grows. And you can also start to see other things. Like you can see children, you can see the family as a thing, you can see the home as a thing. And if you read into more classical books or writings about cosmology and stuff like that, you start to see the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And you can see the 12 signs, you know, and what they mean and how they apply to things. Not even... And people too quickly jump to the conclusion that those things are for fortune telling. I mean, people use them for fortune telling, but if you just have an understanding of what they are, it can help you in your life a lot. So that's something that I feel like people ought to understand. And it's not even really something that I understand entirely, but what little understanding I have, I would like to share. And if by sharing I can learn more, then let's do that, you know? But, I don't know, there are several people who've talked about this, about cosmology and stuff like that, and symbolism. But some of these people have kind of gone off and done other things completely unrelated to it, just for the sake of money or for the sake of popularity or whatever. So I would like to, myself, I guess, kind of talk about those things and focus on those things more intently, you know. I keep saying this, but it's just interesting, you know, to see it and to be able to understand it and apply it to your life or to the world or to God. And something I didn't really go into that I did in my first take was how it relates to God, how the masculine and the feminine relates to God and the church, or Jesus and the church and God and Mary. Where God is in the Thomistic understanding of things, he is the prime actor or active agent. He is the only thing that acts but is not acted upon. And Mary was the ultimate material, the ultimate submissive womb that said, you know, I am completely conforming myself to your will, and through that Christ was born, and only through that could Christ have been born, which people fail to understand. And in that failing to understand, they fail to see a lot of what could be and fail to see a lot of what could be in their own lives, including my own, you know. But that ultimate submission to God is something that more people should understand. And I think, and you hear it all the time, you know, in sermons and stuff like that, but so many things have lost their impact. And just now, recently, am I learning to see the impact of all these things and their significance. And that's just something I would like to share with people, but nobody wants to talk about it. So I'm just going to record videos about it, and whoever is interested can take it, you know. All the knowledge in the world is out there for the taking. You just have to go out there and get it. So here's some more. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe for when I do more videos about this. I'm not sure what video I'm going to do next. It may be on that anime that I was talking about. It may be on another topic. I think I'm going to try and get it posted next week, and that's going to be my goal. I'm a goal-oriented male. I'm the masculine. I have to set goals and pursue them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not sure how scripted I'm going to make these things. I think having done this on a second take, I was more concise with a lot of things, and I avoided a lot of the dead wood, as C.S. Lewis would say. So I think that's ultimately beneficial. But thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed the video. Dislike if you didn't. If you really didn't like it, just go away. No, don't go away. Just tell me what I can do better, you know. Do I need to like wear a better sweater? Maybe. Who knows? Comment. Let me know if you have any observations or if you have any revelations or anything like that in the comments. And I will see you in the next video.